For more resources, visit rymonline.org.
The Local Youth Worker is a daily podcast that's centered on 5 questions each week. Ranging from the practical to the professional, we're looking for answers to the questions you're asking. Whether you're in full-time, part-time, or even volunteer youth ministry, this podcast is for you.
Hey everyone, as we get to today's episode, I wanted to tell you we had some technical difficulties with this episode. Specifically, my microphone was having some issues, so you'll hear some feedback, a clicking sound, but we wanted to go ahead and play the episode because Julie Lowe's content was so great and helpful for parents dealing with teenagers and technology, so we hope that you're blessed by it, even though the audio on my end isn't the best. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Local Youth Worker, a daily podcast brought to you by Reformed Youth Ministries. I'm your host, John Parrott. All this week, we'll be speaking with Julie Lowe. Julie, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Julie is a faculty member at Christian Counseling and Educational Foundation, CCEF, where she has served for more than 15 years. She holds an MA in counseling from Biblical Theological Seminary. She is a licensed professional counselor with over 15 years of counseling experience. She has extensive experience with women's issues, sexual abuse, body image issues, parenting, and child maltreatment issues, and regularly speaks at events on these topics. Julie is also a registered play therapist and has developed a play therapy office at CCEF to better serve families, teens, and children. Julie has trained a therapy dog that she works with both professionally and on a volunteer basis. Julie and her husband, Greg, have 5 children and serve as foster and adoptive parents. That keeps you busy, huh?
It does, yeah. And since then, we've now added a 6th child, so
Wow.
Our quiver is full.
Wow. Well, congrats.
Thanks.
All right. So all this week, we'll be talking with Julie about teens and technology. This is a topic that Julie has given much thought to and counseled families and teens through many issues related to technology. And so with that being said, are you ready for the first question, Julie?
I'm ready. Shoot.
All right. So today's question is, what are the most frequent technology-related issues you find yourself dealing with when counseling teens and families? As I said, you deal with a lot of this, and so what are some of those that kind of come to the top of the most frequent issues you're dealing with?
So there are numerous, and probably ones that won't surprise many youth workers. Some of the top ones I would say would be pornography and sexting. It's happening more and more frequently because it's more accessible at their fingertips. An obsession with social media, an addiction to it, for lack of a better word, but an obsession with social media. And I would say just one of the things we don't think of very often related to this is the greater influence of peer on peers. So with the coming of technology, I would say our children are being raised by their own peers more and more often.
Interesting. And so just going back to the first that you said isn't surprising is pornography. I saw a stat recently, 9 years old is kind of the average age. What are you seeing in teens that you're dealing with? What are some of the average ages you're dealing with, and how long have they been looking at it typically by the time you're dealing with them? Just something along those lines.
Right. I've heard that statistic too, that you're hearing around 9 or 10 kids are being introduced to it, and quite unintentionally. It's not like these are kids who are growing up in sexualized environments looking for it. It is they're stumbling upon it or they're being pursued aggressively. So children unknowingly being handed technology, and there are forces out there that press in. They're looking for children to be exposed to. Kids are getting exposed to it on the school bus. So they might not even have technology, but the child they're sitting next to on the school bus has a cell phone, says, hey, you want to see something cool, and it introduces them to pornography. So it's just rampant. And I get concerned even with my kids riding the school bus because I know there's only so much as a parent you can control.
Absolutely. I mean, that's something when I've done student ministry for over 15 years now, and of course, had seen a steady increase of this in my time, in youth ministry. And oftentimes, like you said, sometimes it was students stumbling upon this. They might hear a word from their friends and they were unsure what that sexual word was, and so they Google it, and so they stumble
Yep.
across issues like that.
Yeah.
And then also, maybe an old iPod that the parents forgot about, and they pick that up and, are able to find all sorts of images. But when you say that
Mhm.
they're pursued aggressively, could you talk a little bit more, just what you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, even the porn industry will pick websites that are most commonly searched by young people, teens and kids alike, and they'll make it like a one letter off. I won't presume I'm the expert in this, but they'll use sites that are similar that are Googled often, so that kids will click on that thinking they're reaching Michael Jordan. Now I'm dating myself, Kobe Bryant, and and then they end up at a porn site without knowing it. So that's where I think our kids are aggressively being pursued, and they're being corrupted by what's out there, and they're not being trained to know what to do when that happens.
Yeah, I think Tim Challies was one of the earliest authors that I read of just, how drastically this had changed from having to walk into a gas station and purchase a magazine behind the counter, but now this
Right.
this stuff is coming after you. It's looking for, in this case, our children, very
Yeah.
soon.
Yeah. A good point to add to that is, I mean, like you're saying, it used to be you had to actively leave your home, go someplace, risk being seen in public, being old enough to purchase an item or find it under your parents' bed, things like that, where now you could be sitting at the dining room table with your family and your children being exposed to all kinds of things and the parents right there without any awareness of what's happening. So you don't have to leave the comfort of your own home to be corrupted by what's out there.
That's right. I think Tim Chester gets into the triple A engine of
Mhm.
pornography, and I'm forgetting all these, but I know accessibility is one, anonymity, and I think the third is
Yep,
affordability. It's free,
I think
um,
so. Yeah.
so that is what's driving most of the porn industry. And another one you hit on, you said addiction. I know sometimes people, recoil by hearing the word addiction attached to technology. I mean, personally speaking, I think it's an accurate term. And I guess just kind of following up with that, do you think that is too strong of a term? And why would you, back up using addiction language when speaking of technology use?
That's a great question. I can be torn in both directions. I think, yes, it is a probably accurate picture. And for culturally, I think it helps people understand the strength of it. So I don't mean that even clinically as much as just the expression of it and how it captures somebody. And at CCF, we're all about the heart and understanding the motives of the heart and what captures our desires. Um, and the pull on it. So that I think really is the foundation of thinking about it. But the addictions language helps us understand the implications of it, the gravity of it, the strength that it can have in somebody's life for sure. So I think it's probably even fair to say I've been in counseling trainings where they've talked about technology actually being added to the DSM as an addiction. Gaming addiction, particularly, was something I heard. So it's yet to be seen whether that will actually happen. But I would say probably the therapeutic world at large is acknowledging this is a prevailing problematic, um, again, addictive quality that's
Hmm.
happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one, I definitely see it in my own life and see the temptations there and just the constant desire to pull it out of my pocket and, check and, see if there's a
Mhm.
text and, all of those various things. But, being in student ministry as well, we, we would have an electronic device policy for some of our retreats where we would
Yeah.
limit the amount that they could use it, or even if they could bring it. And there was some definite pushback where you felt like, okay, I think we're taking a bottle out of somebody's hand is what it feels
Yeah.
like in some
Yeah.
cases.
Yep.
So yeah, I would say that's some accurate language. Well, the last one you hit on, you said peer on peer influence. Do you mind
Mhm.
just speaking on that a little bit more? That's something I really haven't. I mean, I've thought about a bit, but surely not as much as you have.
Yeah, so one of the things I am concerned about is I think modern culture, and this is happening over the years in many ways. Um, our children are having less influence of adults in their life and more peer influence. And I think as a result, when technology has entered in, it's not just kind of kids consistently being entertained to death, and we talk about those things, but with it, a thing I think we miss often as adults is our children are being influenced by other children, or teens being influenced by other teens, peers being influenced by other peers on a regular basis. It's nonstop. So it's a peer preference. For some kids, it's a peer obsession. So we think it's an obsession with technology, but it's really a sense of I need to be around my peer group all the time, and if I'm cut out from them, if I lose touch, it creates some of these issues of anxiety or stress. Um, we'll talk about depressions and things like that as well. But so the secondary concern in that is we as parents and adults are having less and less influence on young people, and they're being raised by their own peer group. So parents and adults are becoming inconsequential, insignificant, because peers have always access to one another at all times now. So it used to be, they spent a huge chunk, 6 hours a day, 7 hours a day with their peer group. You come home and you'd have the rest of the day and the weekends with your parents, with exceptions. However, nowadays they come home, they get right on the Xbox, and they're playing games till 4 a.m. with their friends, or they're having conversations while that's happening, or they're FaceTiming one another, or all the social media that exists. So from morning to night, peers are connected to their peers, and who is engaging with them on an adult, mature level that's helping shepherd them, helping mature them. So thus, I would say it's becoming more and more alarming that adults are being pushed out of the equation altogether as having a voice in teens' lives. And that's happening younger and younger.
That is very sobering. I mean, I've definitely, thought about just that, as we've kind of used this language before, that these teenagers have their entire classroom in their pocket, basically, that they just bring the classroom home with them. And so they're never relieved of that pressure, to perform and to, keep their kind of school identity just always, on. But to think of how parents are getting kind of sidelined by that, that's, very sobering and alarming to think about. But those are some helpful things for us. Anything you want to add to that before we close out?
Well, I'm just thinking even from a youth worker perspective, so it becomes a bit of a catch-22 for youth workers, or even me as a counselor, others, to say, well, do we enter into the social media world then to be a voice, to be connected, to know what's going on? And to some degree, I think yes. And to some degree, we're encouraging kind of those pseudo fake relationships that are not face-to-face. So it is problematic, and I hate having a strong opinion over one. I just think it becomes a bit of a catch-22 for adults to say, yes, we should be engaged in what's happening in social media, but I hope that's not my primary avenue for engaging young people too. We've got to go back to teaching them what real relationships look like.
Yeah, amen to that. And I think you're wise to not have a strong line there, because it's just going to force people to exercise discernment, that there are those times to kind of enter in, to know what's going on, but then also, as we're speaking to youth workers and parents, to pull back as well, and to kind of use that as a teaching point to students of, face-to-face interaction is vitally important, and that's how, we were created. And so technology can offer great blessings like this very podcast. You're in Pennsylvania, I'm in Mississippi, and we can record this, but it ultimately doesn't replace sitting down and having face-to-face interaction. So anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's well said. Yeah.
All right. That's all very helpful. Thanks so much, Julie.
You're welcome.